Imagine the vast windswept hills of medieval England, where the wind howls like a living thing and snow blankets the world in merciless silence. A lone figure trudges across the icy moors, wrapped in layers of coarse wool, a shepherd guiding his flock through a landscape that seems to test his very existence. His life is often romanticized, painted as an idyllic pastoral dream, but reality is far harsher. Winter in medieval England was not a season, it was a relentless adversary. For the shepherd, it was a battle waged every day, where a single mistake could cost his life or the lives of his flock, without the walls of a castle or the warmth of a village hearth. His survival depended on ingenuity, resilience, and a deep understanding of the land. He had to be part architect, part engineer, part psychologist, and part midwife. Every tool he had, every trick he learned from his father and grandfather, could be the difference between life and death. Stay with us, and you'll discover how he used his sheep as living walls against the wind, turned his clothes into a waterproof cocoon, found fuel where none seemed to exist, and relied on solitude and his loyal dog to endure the coldest nights. This is not just a story of survival, it's a lesson in human ingenuity against the rawest forces of nature. The shepherd's home was a far cry from the stable village huts. Often it was no more than a temporary shelter built directly in the pasture, carefully positioned to block the fiercest winds. Constructed from whatever the land offered: turf, stones, heather, twigs. These huts were squat, partially sunken into the ground to take advantage of the earth's retained heat. Walls made of carefully stacked sod or dry stones were insulated with moss and earth, forming a near airtight barrier against the winter gales. The roofs were thick with turf or reeds, sometimes reinforced with driftwood, and over time, grass would grow on top, making the hut almost invisible against the hills. Inside, the hut was sparse but functional, an earth floor covered in dried ferns or heather, a tiny hearth for fire, and a bed of twigs layered with sheepskin. The genius of this shelter lay in its simplicity and mobility. A shepherd could build one in days using only local materials. Come spring, the hut would return to nature, leaving only faint traces of human habitation. Dark, cramped, smoky, it wasn't a place to live, but it was a fortress against the winter elements. And yet, the shepherd's most crucial warmth didn't come from walls at all. It came from his flock. That the flock was the shepherd's lifeline. In winter, hundreds of sheep huddled together in the sheepfold, a dense living mass generating remarkable heat. The shepherd often positioned himself near the leeward side of this living windbreak. Hundreds of bodies pressed together, their collective warmth creating a pocket of relative heat amidst the freezing air. The shepherd didn't just rely on this heat. He understood his sheep as a living system. He listened to their breathing, noted the slightest change in movement, and knew the moment danger approached. A predator, a sudden noisy. Even the onset of disease, he could detect it through the subtle rhythms of his flock. Sleeping next to the herd, the shepherd gained both warmth and protection. Their dung and straw bedding rotted slowly, releasing that heat that further insulated the ground. This symbiotic relationship was survival engineering in its purest form. The shepherd protected the sheep, and the sheep returned that protection in warmth and vigilance. Fire was sacred. In the middle of a snowy wasteland, a small flame was life itself. Starting a fire in the icy wind required skill, patience, and knowledge. Flints, dried mushrooms, charred cloths, and the tiniest spark could be the difference between warmth and a frozen night. Fuel was scarce. Dry wood was rare on open hills. The shepherd often relied on heather, thorn bushes, gorse, and most ingeniously, dried sheep dung. Collected in summer and dried under the sun, these dung briquettes burned slowly, steadily, and with minimal smoke. Maintaining a fire overnight required the art of smothering coals under ash, letting them burn in slow, controlled smoldering that it could be reignited at dawn. This small, meticulously tended flame was more than warmth. It was light in the long winter night, a psychological anchor in a vast, unfeeling wilderness. Clothing for a shepherd wasn't fashion, it was survival. Dense wool, often unwashed to preserve natural lanolin, formed a waterproof, windproof cocoon. Cloaks like the panula with deep hoods, layered linen shirts, wool tunics, and protective woolen wraps for hands and feet created a personal microclimate. Shoes were reinforced with animal fat or tar to repel water, often stuffed with straw for insulation. Every layer was deliberate, every thread valued. In this cocoon, a shepherd could sit in snowstorms, keep warm, and even sleep without succumbing to frostbite. Even his staff became part of this survival system. By propping it and draping his cloak over it, he could create a small windbreak, tiny tent to shield against the biting elements. The color of his clothing also mattered. Usually dark, muted tones such as gray, brown, or dark green helped him blend into the landscape, avoiding predators and thieves. These clothes were the product of his labor, sheared from his own flock, spun and woven by his family. They weren't just garments, they were an extension of his very survival. The shepherd's true genius lay in reading the land. Every ravine, forest, and hill was a clue, a tool, a source of survival. Southern slopes were preferred for winter pastures. Natural barriers offered protection from wind, and hidden springs provided water. By observing birds, clouds, and the wind. The shepherd could predict storms, wolves, movements, or where snow would trap a sheep. He didn't fight nature. He became part of it, learning to work with its strengths, respect its dangers, and use its features as shelter, food, and protection. No companion was as crucial as the shepherd's dog. These early collie-type dogs were intelligent, loyal, and protective. They herded the sheep, warned of predators, guided strays, and even warmed the shepherd in frigid nights. More than utility, the dog was a friend. Weeks of isolation could break a man, but a warm, breathing companion beside him made solitude bearable. The dog was his partner, his family, his guardian, and often the only living creature with whom he shared his life and thoughts. The shepherd's diet was austere but designed for energy and endurance. Hard barley or rye cakes, salted cheese, occasional dried meat, oatmeal or barley gruel, and dried fruits like apples or berries formed his daily intake. On bitter days, these simple foods kept him moving, sustained his strength, and allowed him to endure the harshest weather. Even meals were designed for portability and survival. Everything he ate was long-lasting, easy to carry, and calorically dense. Every morsel counted. Fuel for fire was always a challenge. Beyond dung, the shepherd collected deadwood, dried heather, and bog peat. In treeless landscapes, he made fuel from whatever he could find, demonstrating ingenuity, adaptability, and an intimate understanding of his environment. Nothing was wasted. The herd provided warmth, food, clothing, and fuel, a self-sufficient ecosystem, where survival was a careful balance of resources and skills. The greatest challenge was psychological. Weeks alone with only sheep and a dog demanded fortitude. The shepherd developed rituals, songs, stories, and constant observation of his environment to maintain his sanity. He became self-reliant, observant, and adaptable not just physically, but mentally. This resilience allowed him to endure storms, cold nights, disease, and predators. Survival wasn't just practical, it was an art of the mind, an unbroken dialogue with the natural world. Spring brought the lambing season, a time of both hope and danger. Newborn lambs were fragile, exposed to frost and predators. The shepherd became a midwife, caretaker, and nurse. Weak lambs were brought into the hut, warmed by the hearth, and fed by hand. Every life saved was critical. Every lamb lost was a potential economic disaster. The shepherd's expertise, vigilance, and care during this time defined the future of his flock and, by extension, his survival. The medieval shepherd teaches us that survival is not about technology, comfort, or abundance. It is about knowledge, resilience, and adaptation. With simple tools, keen observation, and deep respect for nature, a solitary man could endure some of the harshest conditions imaginable. His genius lay in turning his environment, his flock, his clothing, and his mind into instruments of survival. Every snowstorm, every frozen night, every threat was met with ingenuity, patience, and unwavering resolve. This is more than a story of a shepherd. It is a hymn to human endurance, quiet wisdom, and the intimate dance with nature that made life possible even in the cruelest winters. Long before stoves, coats, and central heating, men like this shepherd mastered survival in a world that tested every sinew of their body and spirit. As we study his experience, we see that survival is not always a matter of technology and resources. It is often a matter of adaptation, ingenuity, and a deep respect for the world in which you live. The story of the medieval shepherd is a hymn to human endurance and the quiet, unassuming wisdom that allows life to go on even in the most inhumane conditions. If you are interested in this journey into the harsh and lonely world of medieval pastures, and you want to know more about how people survived in the past, give us a like and be sure to subscribe to our channel. There are many more stories of forgotten heroes and their amazing tricks ahead.